What's going on, everybody? All right, so let's get into it. And this video may be a little late, but I have used the crap out of this knife. I mean, I've used this knife. I didn't even really clean the blade from where I used it today. But this blade really doesn't get dirty. This stone wash finish actually is pretty good. You can see I can wipe that off. And I cut a lot of stuff with this. And we're going to talk about something about this that affected the score that I noticed today and I'd never noticed. And this is the only knife I've ever really noticed it on, but I do buy some beefy knives. So maybe that's not why I noticed it. So let's get into it. Maybe that's why I've not noticed it on other knives, but let's get into it. All right, so we have the reigning champ, the Spyderco Para 2 on the top right here, so we can reflect the scores along with the final score. That's gonna be hard to beat. So this is the S35 version, not the D2 version. That's a deep pocket clip. That thing's deep. So carryability, it gets a 10. This thing hides away in your pocket. Look how deep that pocket clip is. I mean, it hides away. It's got a nice little raised place on the clip so it can actually get into your pocket with no problem. It's got a nice little flipper on it. I mean, it's easy to, it's easy to carry. It's easy to use. It's just a really good knife to carry because it's very lightweight. Practicality, it gets a 5. And I'm going to tell you why I gave it a 5. So, when I use practicality, I put a lot of stuff into this, such as, EDC use and tactical use and stuff like that. And this is definitely not a tactical knife by no means. And there's something about the EDC use today that I've seen, and I don't know if I can duplicate it. Look how far that lock just went over right there. Look at that. Now let me close this and show you how far it normally goes. Look how far it is right now. You can see it's just barely touching the side, and if I put some pressure on it, it goes like halfway over. And the reason I think that is because it has this little bitty stop pin right there. And I think when you put pressure on it, it allows that blade to flex back and lets the lock bar go further over. Now, it's good the lock bar goes further over and doesn't come loose and slide out and cut your finger off or something, but that's a weak stop pin. That's just weak. And that's why I gave it a 5, because even on some EDC tasks, it was able to flex the blade enough to lock. I just didn't like that it did that. So that affected the practicality score. Great EDC knife, but I just feel like that stop pin flexed a little bit on me. Okay, next, sliceability. It gets a 9. It sliced very well. I did cut some rubber hose and stuff like that with it, and that's when I noticed this actually coming over more, and it sliced right through it, no problems. It did great with that. It did really amazing with the slicing task, so it did get a 9. There are knives that slice better than this, but this is a really good slicer. Okay, next, you have hold an edge, and it got an 8. And there again, like I said, I'll throw in a picture right here. The reason I give it these scores is because Blade HQ has a chart that tells you how well things hold an edge, and I actually use their score on this because they have metallurgists and stuff that actually make these charts, and I believe what they say, and this S35 does hold an edge good, and it gets an 8 on that part. So next is warranty. I gave it a 7, and you can see right here it's scribbled out. I had it as an 8, and the reason I deducted it another point is, in their warranty, it says if you disassemble this knife, that it voids the warranty. And Benchmade's said the same thing. And I told you all in the Benchmade bug out video that the reason I gave it an 8 was because of Life Sharp. They'll sharpen the knife for life for free. Well, it didn't say that with this one. And I don't know if they do that, but it didn't say that in the warranty. So I docked it a point because it does not have Life Sharp, and Benchmade does, and that's why I scored Benchmade so high. But it did state that if you take this apart, that it will void the warranty, just like the Benchmade did. But since this one I didn't see had Life Sharp, I actually had to deduct a point off of it. I just felt like that was fair over the Benchmade. Okay, so next is materials, and I gave it a 5. And you're going back, why'd you give it a 5? Okay. This micarta is not anywhere near the best micarta I've ever felt. It's slick. It feels kind of hard. There's not any texture really to it. I just didn't like this. that stop pin being so thin and allowing this blade to flex and allowing this lock bar to move over, the stop pin really affected my thought process on why I knocked this down to a 5 on materials. I think they should have made that a little beefier. I mean, cutting rubber hose actually made this go over pretty far. And I was like, wow. So that stop pin being so small is part of the materials they used, and I felt like it should have been a thicker stock. So I did knock it for that, and it got a 5. And this micarta, like I said, is not great. I do love the S35BM, but I did pay extra for that. But the micarta not being great and that stop pin being just tiny actually affected that score. So next is ease of use, and it gets a 10. This thing is very easy to use. Very easy to get in and out of your pocket. You can see how that clip turns up right there, and you can just slide in and out. That flipper is amazing. This thing has butter smooth action, and you can work the lock bar with one hand. You can see it does have a little bit of a cutout right here where you can get in there to the lock bar. It's not like some of the other knives that I have reviewed where it's harder to get into the lock bar, and it's very easy to use one hand, and that's why it got a 10, because it's just really, it's one of the easiest knives to use one-handed that I've tested yet. Next is weight. It gets a 10. The thing's just like a little over 2.5 ounces. I mean, it doesn't weigh anything. It's right there with the Benchmade bug out, and anything under 3 ounces deserves a 10 in my book. All right, cool factor, 4. If I pull this out of my pocket and you didn't know what it was, and I'm not knocking like Walmart knives or anything like that, but you could almost see that this being a Walmart knife. You can see the micarta doesn't come all the way to the top. The metal kind of sticks out a little bit. It just has like a cheap feel to it. And I'm not knocking the knife. I think it's a good knife, but it just has like a cheaper feel to it. And like the jimping is slick. It's not very grabby. I don't know. I just felt like it felt a little bit cheap. And if you pulled this out, somebody just think you went to Walmart and bought a knife off the shelf. They wouldn't think you had spent $80 at Blade HQ to buy this. I knocked it for that. There's just not a lot cool about this knife if you don't know what it is. And even if you do know what it is, it's a budget knife, and that's why they're selling so well. They're just a budget knife, and a lot of people buy them, the D2 steel, just to beat them up, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for a cool factor, there's not really much cool about this. It's a small EDC. All right, fidget factor, though, kind of made up for it with a 7. The action is very, very smooth, and I did fidget with it some. Not as much as I have some other knives, but I do like flippers, and I do like fidgeting with flippers, and it did get a 7 because of that. It's smooth action, it's fun to play with, and I didn't find myself, fidgeting with it a lot, but I did find myself fidgeting with it with more than some of the other knives that I have used. So what is the final score? Remember, 95 is the score to beat, 75. A very respectable score for such a small, in my opinion, cheap looking knife. I don't think this knife looks very expensive. So a 75 is a pretty good score. It's got good steel, that helped it a lot. Fidget factor helped it a lot. Ease of use really helped it. I do think it is a good EDC. Just watch the lockup if you use it heavily or on something hard, because that stop pin actually worries me just a little bit. That's just my opinion. Your mileage may vary, but in my opinion, that stop pin worries me. If that stop pin would have been beefier, this knife would have probably been 8 or 10 points higher than it actually is right now, more than likely. But it wasn't, and that's my score. I appreciate y'all watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.